Welcome to the RevOps Lab, a podcast exploring the art and science of revenue operations. To find more episodes and resources on scaling your revenue engine, visit getweflow.com/RevOps. This episode is brought to you by WeFlow, the easiest way to automate Salesforce data capture. Are you tired of chasing reps for clean CRM data? WeFlow auto-captures emails, meetings, and contacts from Google or Microsoft, maps them to the right records, and stores them in Salesforce permanently. Our A9 note taker transcribes meetings, populates fields across any Salesforce object, and syncs everything, including AI summaries and transcripts, back to Salesforce. So you stay in control and your pipeline stays clean. That's what RevOps teams at Plecklane, Coder, ID Now, and many more love about WeFlow. Start your free 14-day trial with a quick intro call at getweflow.com today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevOps Lab. We're here with Julien Cerutti. I don't know if I pronounced that one correctly.
Yeah.
Always. It's a running joke. I always pronounce names very poorly. Julien, great to have you. Welcome on the show.
Thank you. Really excited to be here and excited about the topic we're going to get into.
Absolutely. We're going to go deep on sales methodologies and qualification frameworks today. But before we do that, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Julien Cerutti. I work at Meltwater. I'm the VP of Revenue Strategy. And so for me, it's basically looking at the holistic customer journey and architecting go-to-market initiatives, programs around that.
Yeah,
So
awesome. I mean, we actually met through Theth, right? Like who we had here on the show talking about RevOps and FP&A. He recommended to reach out, and now we're here actually 2 weeks later. So that's awesome. We love that. I always say choosing a sales methodology is easy. Implementing it is really, really, really hard. So maybe, that's the kickoff for our topic today. You just went through this process. So today we want to talk about, how did you find the right methodology for you? What were pitfalls introducing those, and, how do you implement them? And how do you make it a living project? So maybe let's kick off with why did you actually want to do it in the first place? Why did you feel you need a sales methodology?
yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just contextually where Meltwater was at the given time. We had a new CRO step in, and similar to a lot of companies, we started to say, we're going to start moving up market. We're going to be focusing on the enterprise. And as we were looking at basically redesigning the enterprise go-to-market motion, I just felt like it was that time and place to say we really need to put our foot down and say there is a sales methodology and there's a consistent way for us to create operational learning as an organization and really develop. And so when I spoke with my CRO, I just said, this is going to be something that we have to hit on front and center. And a lot of that was basically a byproduct of, it was a bit of a Wild West or what you call hero ball, where you just had top performers and everything. So, it just seemed like as we were growing as an organization, it was a maturity thing in terms of just stepping into something much more structural as an organization.
Yeah. And then I think you mentioned, you've been working on this for a bunch of months. When did you kick off the process? How long has it been so far?
Yeah, no, it's been like 2-3 years now since the very beginning stages of it. And so, I initially, when I came into enterprise, I actually adopted the MEDDIC methodology, and I am well versed in that and knew the ins and outs of it. But then as we were looking at the go-to-market design for enterprise and thinking about future implications for Meltwater, I obviously wanted to see what else was out there. And so one of the big things that we were thinking about was the GRR and thinking about the entire customer journey. And I think because it was about re-architecting the entire customer journey, it started to speak to me in terms of a holistic way of, hey, if we're going to rebuild what we're thinking about in the enterprise, let's not just, zero in on the sales methodology. Let's look at an architecture that makes sense, that can also really influence and impact our GRR, because that was one of the key things that we wanted to drive with it.
And what did you end up choosing in terms
Yeah.
of
And so
methodology.
we chose with winning by design. So I'm sure some of the listeners are familiar with that, and selecting SPICE as part of that framework. And the key thing was that holistic architecture, which in many ways, it was selected. And I think there's still implications as to things I can build in the future that are already preset there, or saying, hey, we already have those fields in Salesforce, so now I can integrate it and provide that information to product marketing, or hand that to the onboarding team for CS to do X, Y, and Z. So um, it just seemed to be very well rounded in terms of a holistic architecture. And I think, a lot of the trends has been the focus on the post sale, and how you need to focus on NRR and everything. I just felt like it was very tightly integrated in terms of having that holistic focus versus us just primarily focusing on, let's, increase conversion, ASP, all of those things on the sales side.
Yeah, I'm curious about like this, that you've been on it for such a long time now, and I wonder if we could go back like a little bit to the beginning.
Yeah.
How that actually worked out. Like, starting to talk about, spiced. I think that there's like this discussion that you have more like on the frontline level.
Yeah.
Like individual contributors. Kind of like getting their buy-in, but then there's also the managers, there's the leadership. Sort of
Yeah.
like, how did that go down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at Meltwater, we're a fairly large organization. I think our sales force is around 600 to 700 people, 750, right? So you have to think holistically, like, how do we get our champions? How do we have influence that people don't think of this as flavor of the month, right? It's like, oh, well, some of us know MEDDIC, and, down market, a lot of us like BANT. Like, why are we going to take this head on, right? So I'm sure it's what everyone else is thinking for the most part, where you have to have executive buy-in. You have to have the executives ready to go and understand what it is and speak the language. And then the bottoms up approach, which with winning by design, a lot of the stuff we did in designing the programming was developing playbooks and or motions, but it was essentially co-built by being very selective around key champions around the global ecosystem, sales, CS, and so on. And so if you're co-building with a lot of the champions in that broader ecosystem that have leverage, have that presence in certain offices, super areas, and so on, then that helps create a lot of the adoption. And so, I pulled at all of those levers, and it's not to say it was the most perfect thing ever. And then, everything changed overnight. And I think what I'm experiencing now, 2, 3 years later, is the continued evolution and iteration that needs to occur, and looking at the data and deciding, like, what is the next step? What are we seeing to improve upon that? Touching on the frontline manager piece, yeah, that's like, I have a lot of commentary in that. I joked, like, if I was going to write a book around go-to-market, it would be about how the frontline manager makes or breaks, especially for a large organization like Meltwater, where you've got, the entire global ecosystem, right? We have offices from Tokyo all the way to LA and Europe and so on, right? So the thing is, like, we can educate, we can coach, we can teach, we can give all of the enablement, full 360 programming. And I'll talk about probably operational cadence in two, because that's just absolutely significant, because we want to create habits. But the truth is, someone can look at one document and the other person can look at the same document and interpret that differently. And so even though you said, hey, we've created a unified way of understanding how we look at our customers and how we evaluate deals, and we break it down to modular components, every manager looks at it differently. They coach differently, and then the outcomes become different. And that's something I'm still constantly battling, which I'm happy to talk about too.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. Also, like the piece about the, how things can break, with the make or break it with like the frontline managers. Definitely, I think also our experience, right? Like introducing a tool like WeFlow, it can be change management, right? Basically, depending on what part of our product, but it can be change management, and you need to have champions in your organization. You need to convince like the frontline managers as well. I'm curious about like the cadence piece, because I think that's such an important point on like introducing this, particularly with the frontline managers, right? Because like they own some of those cadences, So if they don't, start using Spiced in your case, during those meetings, then it's never really gonna work out.
Yeah.
So yeah, curious like what you did to incentivize that, or like if you did, or maybe the opposite of incentive. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll kind of break it down. I mean, one of the key things in that rollout was actually designing a frontline manager playbook, and a core pillar of that was basically introducing the concept of operational rhythm, operational cadence, and saying we're going to look at your week, we're going to look at your month, your quarter, and structurally, this is how you need to approach your business. And there's something called deal inspections. In the past, there would be a lot of forecast calls where the inspection would happen in the forecast calls. But maybe you guys have experienced this too, right? The forecast call turns into, hey, so what's up with that deal? Okay, and what's the next? Okay, great. Next, right? No code.
It's no real inspection, right?
There's no inspection.
It's not real. There's not the time nor the calmness, and then the room is too full. And so,
exactly. And everyone is sitting silently on the side, waiting for their turn. They're looking at the computer and typing away.
That's me.
I'm sure everyone's laughing at that comment because it's just like, that's exactly it, right? So it's like one of the simplest things was just saying there is a separate call that should be around deal inspection. You should choose, based on this criteria, you should choose these type of accounts, these type of reps. You need to have everyone come together and coach and learn together. There's simple things like 3&Me from someone, Lindsay Bai at Winning by Design introduced to us. Is like, before you become the savior as a manager, you first ask, well, Philip, what do you think? Janice, what do you think? Before I answer, because you want to get that collaboration. You want people critically thinking about things. So anyway, with the cadence, we were just introducing, you need to create this. And what we wanted to do was create habit forming structure to the organization. This is what I do. It's just typical, right? Every Tuesday I do this for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is that they do structurally. So that was some of the operational cadence stuff that we brought into the organization. And again, that's where a couple months later, you ask your frontline manager and it's like, I don't do it. I do it on my one-on-ones, and then you start getting that unified approach, and then it starts to dismantle, and then you start going back to iterating again, saying, all right, how do we solve for this? How to create scoreboards and rankings and anything else that we can modify and or tweak in the ecosystem that would ask a manager to say, hey, I need to look deeper into this, right? And the what's really validating is that those who have taken on a lot of the methodology and I have deal scoring that's tied into Salesforce, so I could look at someone's pipeline. I know the average score and what's the lowest score if we have economic buyers engaged, all of those things. Some of the best managing performers right now are the ones that are champions of it, and their scores are super high and their conversions are way better than anyone else year over year. There's someone in EMEA that's had like 17% and now it's 31 in Q2 from Q2 to Q2. It's substantial. And then you have other ones that are flat or kind of declining. And then you ask, and then there's a breakdown and somewhere in that process. So it's all validating. And even the deal scores I have in Salesforce, the higher the score goes up, the higher the conversion rate. We've looked at all the historical analysis. We have everything. So it's funny. The data is compelling, but you still find the cracks. And that's, maybe where I could talk about 40X and lead measures and other things that we're trying to do with it.
I mean, as Philip and I are building WeFlow that automates Salesforce data capture and then, drives insights and stuff like that, right? Like, obviously super curious about kind of your implementation in Salesforce. So can you tell us a bit more, like, how did you operationalize Spiced, in Salesforce?
Yeah, so a lot of this was thinking about like that whole 360 design. Like I can't just roll out and say, hey, we're doing Spiced. You got a couple training sessions. Here's like a deal inspection sheet. Go after it.
Yeah.
So operational cadence was one of those things, but the other things was like, it needs to live in our ecosystem. There needs to be data to support it. So deal scoring actually came from the fact that I used a lot of the MEDDIC playbook of win, loss, and slipped deals. And what I did was it was initially more of a manual scrub. I wanted to get a sample size of deals And I actually just sent it out to reps and said, and had a list of questions, check boxes, scores, everything like that, and said, give me a really deep dive into this deal as to why we won, slipped, or lost it. And then I collected all of that data and started to deeply analyze it. And then based upon that, I created a weighted scoring of SPICED MEDDIC, essentially. But then I went to within our RevOps team in IT to basically say, I want to put this into Salesforce and start building it. So I had a lot of good momentum behind it because there was adoption. People were excited about the methodology. They liked the scoring. And it was really a pragmatic design in terms of like, hey, if we can have deal scores, like imagine the implications for the future. And to me, I said it's a bit of a watershed moment because it really allows for true adoption, because now we have data that shows reps are doing it, they're scoring it, we're weighting it, all of those aspects are happening. So I think there was just a part of it was momentum. It's like one of my things that I always use in my arsenal is like keep momentum. If you lose momentum on projects, it dissipates. So, it was about moving super fast. So when I collected that data, it was, I moved as fast as I could to just create that wave of momentum, everyone talking about it, that kind of thing.
So maybe just to recap on the implementation side, right? So ensuring that you have champions, especially on the frontline manager, executive buy-in, obviously champions on the rep level, right? Like illustrate success. So that's super important. Then secondly, right, like being able to, properly enable, train on a recurring basis. Thirdly, that you capture the data and you make the data actionable. What I find really interesting here is that you started with analyzing the data first to then decide how to implement it into the CRM, right? Like starting with like kind of win-loss analysis, slip deals, push deals, right? Like really understanding like what that is, and any insights there that you found.
I'll tell you some of those insights. So I come from sales background. I've been an AE, and part of me was just thinking like, how do I sell this in many ways? How do I get people really fired up and excited? So I said, I'm going to do this analysis and I can give it back to the organization and say, hey, mid-market, hey, enterprise, these are the reasons why you win deals, why you slip deals. This is why you're losing. And going into like a written document that, if you're an AE and saying, this isn't generic, this isn't a book you can read. This is about real Meltwater data that tells you why you're winning, slipping, and losing deals, and the advantages you can have having that context and what you should do moving forward. So I wanted to create something really compelling in that. So that was kind of bundled with, and we're going to launch deal scoring. And so now you have a modular approach to look at it. And, the outcomes, I'm sure many companies see the same thing. Surprise, surprise. We win deals when we have really strong champions. They're the domino effect of getting access to power, the economic buyer, and information, which is basically the decision process, decision criteria. That's the main thing. And it was a bit of, I have other things like executive interlock for enterprise. Like you want executives engaged beyond just the economic buyer, but you want, your CEO or someone in the C-suite engaged with it. And so it incrementally increases the score if you have these other attributes, but the champion is the centerpiece. For slip deals, it's all no surprise, right? Slip deals, guess what? Decision process. That was the score that just had the biggest margin of change when we were losing or slipping deals, right? And then the reason we're losing deals was decision criteria. We actually didn't really document and synthesize exactly what they were buying and creating value differentiation and saying, why us? So those were the big headlines. And what's funny is I first started in enterprise and then I did it in mid-market SMB. The data was almost entirely the same. So I just said, hey, this is the Meltwater use system. And, I'm sure it's pretty universal what I just said. But I had the real Meltwater data to support it.
Hey, Philip here. Are you enjoying this episode? Well, good news, because you can find more free RevOps and go-to-market resources on getweflow.com/RevOps. Access over 20 cheat sheets, reports, and guides that will help you become a better revenue operator. Or join over 2,000 subscribers who already get the latest resources right into their inboxes with our free newsletter. Just go to getweflow.com/RevOps.
It might be universal, but it's very different to go to a rep and basically tell that story and tell this is why it matters and tell that to the frontline managers. And then basically what they are thinking is like, oh, look, this is not some fluff stuff that people tell me and put on top just to control me. This is something that can advance me in my career. This is something how I can make more money, right? Like this is real.
You're doing my
stuff,
sales pitch right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think you're right. Like I think this is a really, really important thing because it really starts in the head, right? Like it really starts in the head. Like the people need to see that it's not just for the sake of creating a sales methodology. It's really like to basically become better sellers, better managers, more successful, right?
Right. And it was important for me to ground it in the realist way possible, which is like, I used real Meltwater data. This is not like, hey, Julien read a book or like our CRO read something and now everyone's running for it, that kind of thing. Because I do feel companies sometimes have that jaded response of leadership decided this out of nowhere or whatever it may be, right? So I just wanted it to be as grounded as possible.
Yeah, I really like that. On that, actually, I have a follow-up question. So how transparent is that? So is that something, where you actively or proactively try to create like a lot of transparency around the different like SPICED metrics that you track, calculate, and cover? So can any rep sort of like look into that, how people are doing? And so, okay.
Yeah,
so
I try to make it as transparent as possible, and there's still like iterations of that, but there's dashboards that give full exposure to different teams, managers across the world. I have one dashboard is basically every frontline manager in the enterprise, and I just have them all stacked, real-time data, commit stage versus evaluate, and given the fact that I told you champion, economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, the needle movers, I actually have that live data in the dashboard. I'm like, we're going to track towards this, which maybe is a good transition with the 40x stuff that I'd like to talk about. But yeah, I'm trying to give as much visibility, scoreboards, rankings, so people have a sense of that.
Yeah, actually, perfect. Actually, that's what I try to do, to like little segue into 40x. So, I think perfect. I mean, Julien, please just take it away, I think.
Yeah. So, one of the things right now that I had that data in my hands and I knew exactly why we're winning, slipping, and losing, I wanted to find a way to continue adoption and programs to create excitement and so on. This idea actually came from a board member that we have, and he utilized it at another company that he was running. And it's called 40X. It's the 4 disciplines of execution. There's a book and a whole methodology around it. But to overtly simplify it, it's really about creating a wildly important goal and then creating lead measures around that. And so the whole premise is it's very noisy. Go to market's really noisy, and you've got so many competing priorities. Your manager's saying this, your CRO saying this, your customers are screaming X, Y, Z. How do I manage all of that noise? And that goes from an IC all the way to managers, to VPs, and so on. So the idea of wildly important goal is that I'm going to spend an exorbitant amount of time on this one thing and ensure that it executes well. And so what you do is, if you 4DX something, your Monday morning meeting where you all have your team, no matter what, those first 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, will always be 40X. It doesn't matter if a building's on fire, we're going to talk about 40X. It's going to be a priority, and you just cascade that down. And so what you can do is say, hey, we're going to increase our conversion by 10%. That's our wildly important goal because it's going to create this XYZ revenue, right? So that's my wildly important goal. Similar to OKRs, I'm going to have that trickle down, and ultimately goes down to a frontline manager, where then I'll say, okay, your goal is that you need to increase the champion score from here to there. That would actually create the conversion rates that we need. So what are going to be activities that would actually move that number from a 1 to a 2, a 2 to a 3? And so that's what we call lead measures. Those are inputs. Some people do the framework of inputs and outputs. What are the inputs that would make the output of that moving up? So then you actually have to design it with your team, and you have conversations. which is already great in itself, right? Hey guys, how would we increase our champion score? How would we increase our decision criteria score? And sparring that out with the team and designing it, and then just saying, okay, I'm going to create a simple scoreboard every week. I just want to make sure we're creating this new habit. And if we can create that habit weekly, and your manager's going to ask you every Monday morning, how many of those did you do? Or like, did you follow through on this? Then it starts to create habits. And now I do it in every single deal. And then it starts increasing the champion score. So I'm simplifying all of the concepts around it, just kind of give like an easy way of digesting that. But then now there's something that's called lead measures, 40X, and managers start their calls and say, let's focus on these lead measures, because ultimately that should increase our deal scores, which ultimately increases our conversion, which ultimately gets us more revenue.
And is this specifically like the cascading of the KPI? I could just call it a KPI tree, right?
Yeah.
You have the basic top KPI, then you have the leading measures that lead into those.
Yeah.
Is that something that you and RevOps decide on? Is that a discussion? How do you come up with it?
The wildly important goal would be something like I'd sit with my CRO and be like, hey, I'm looking at the enterprise, like what do we want as our wildly important goal? And then, there would be discussions of like, what is the key lever here? Because the problem is, right, you start going into like, well, we can do these sales plays, and we can do, we need to accelerate our pipeline. We need to do this. And it's like, okay, that's whirlwind. That's what the book would call it, right? That's everything. You can't do everything. What's the one thing you're going to do that is going to move the needle? And so I love the focus of it. And admittedly, after I had read that book and digested all of it, it was like, this will be part of my playbook. Even if it's not exactly to a T, I think I will always utilize this to say, I need a groundswell of just everyone coming together and focusing on this one thing and making new habits form in the org. And then you fold it back into the whirlwind. Once you see like people know how to build champions here, no problem, right? So that's part of the iteration, right? Of just learning, bringing new ideas and concepts in, because I'm sure you guys know there's no silver bullet. You can read Busting Silos or some book out there and be like, oh my gosh, but you gotta bring your own secret sauce to it and bring the pieces, know the culture, and figure it out.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Is that like the full 40X? I think so. We have the focus, right? We have the leading measures.
Yeah.
You talked about a scoreboard before.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it.
I'm kind of keeping it condensed for you. But yeah, there's a scoreboard, and the idea is like, I actually don't want people building like complex ecosystems of scoreboards. Like, it's got to be simple, back of the napkin. I should show you the scoreboard, and it should take you 5 seconds to know who's doing their job, who's not, kind of thing,
Yeah. I mean, I think this is so compelling because what you're basically alluding to is like, change is just really hard. Habits is just really hard, right? It's not something like you say once and then it just happens. And I really like this term of like widely important goal. I don't know. I just heard it the first time, but it resonates with me because it's like better than we have this like very
North Star.
Yeah, the North Star, right? Like exactly. It's kind of the North Star metric.
Yeah, and it was funny. It's like you initially hear it and you're like, wildly important goal. Are you serious? Like, yeah, what do you mean? But like as you start sitting with it and structuring, you're like, okay, there's a lot more here. So yeah, it's been really interesting exercise so far.
Yeah. Wow. I think we can, talk a lot more about it. And I think, like with this 40X, all the things that you talked about before, creating transparency, using your own data to build like trust and like really like a culture that truly believes in it and loops everyone in and gets their buy-in, using those cadences for accountability, right? I think it's all these parts and aspects of it, and all of them need to be executed and focused on. Otherwise, I don't think I think initiatives like this one work out, right? I mean, like SPICED. I just counted 6 letters. So, 6 mistakes. Like you can do it just with like, different interpretations of, what the methodology, actually stands for. And then different teams, like, okay, what is a compelling event? Ooh, like all these definitions that you need to get like grounded, like you said, I think is so important. Moving also like into 2025 and beyond, I'm curious, like, has AI changed anything for you in regards to SPICED? Is like an AI filling out all the SPICED fields now for you automatically, and no one actually thinks about it anymore? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So, we are using Gong for conversational intelligence, and we've kind of built those trackers, which I'm sure a lot of people are doing with MEDDIC or SPICE and so on. I am thinking about the future implications of how I can augment the a sales rep, and we're talking about different frameworks of how we're going to approach it. And it could be from, creating some matrices in terms of high impact and low hanging fruit and all of that, in terms of the holistic customer journey. But another part of me just says, what if I just looked at a sales rep or a CSM and said, what are all the jobs to be done around a CSM? And then strip those out and say, how can I create teammates, agentic workflows, assistive AIs that would basically go co-create, build programs around them? And so what we've done already with this program is I've created a deal inspection bot, right? It knows why we win, why we lose, why we slip. It knows our scoring methodology. That's all weighted. And it's a MEDDIC and SPICE coach. And it will give you a score, which a rep can say, hey, my champion's a 3. I got this, this, and this. And I'll say, your champion isn't a 3. You don't have these things. So it's actually pressure testing, which was a big thing I focused on in designing that. Because that's exactly what I want a manager to do, right? It's like pressure that. Is the champion a 3? Is the economic buyer engaged? I don't see that here, right? And it's been, initial stages as we iterate, it keeps improving. And I've been really impressed by the fact of, I'll be like, oh, you should just reach out to the economic buyer. It's like, actually, my champion would lose their mind. I tested that kind of stuff. Like, I know what a rep would say and be like, no, champion said, do not reach out. And then it'll be like, oh, okay, I understand. Here are alternative ways of how you can get to build up your champion, create a champion deck to engage the economic buyer, or you can have your executive reach out via email, all of these alternative paths of how you can execute on it. So I'm building a deal inspection, and then we're just talking about, like, do we have other teammates, or do I fold more concepts in, like value justification, ROI calculators, all of those type of things. So right now we're basically designing the infrastructure in the background, and there's all the discussion around build versus buy. But right now, I definitely want to just kind of build and create point of views, and that's where we're with them.
Yeah. One thing I want to add on, right? So I think one of the beautiful things about AI, and WeFlow, right? We also do conversational intelligence and automatic field updates and things like this. But one of the beautiful things I find when we talk about what to do with AI is also it gives you this ability to connect data points a lot easier, like on a much larger scale. So, when you talk about SPICED, right, then, and like another big thing is just like looking at activities, right? Like how many meetings, response time, interactions, all of the things that are also discussed outside of like those, 6 letters. And then, sort of like, connecting them back to, what actually, was discussed in regards to SPICED, and, bring that all together. And I think this is one of the things where AI is like so powerful in actually enabling you to do that, which before was like super manual process. And we know activities are such like a strong leading indicator of like whether a deal is moving forward, velocity of a deal. So
I love all the agentic workflows. I want more data to basically really unpack it. So there's organizational learning, but also like at a rep level, they start seeing those signals. There is this other piece of like, I do want reps to look at a list of questions and sit down and think about them and answer them, right? Because in an agentic workflow, right, like I said, you don't have to fill out anything. The score automatically comes from conversations and activities logged in Salesforce, and your champion's a 3 or it's a 2. But there is that deal inspection thing where there are questions, and I do want them to reflect. And so I feel like I'm going to have to hit some wall, or I have some time where I'm going to have to think about what does that balance look like in the future.
So I feel like this is going to be our next episode with you, where we come together, because we've seen probably now hundreds of like Salesforce setups, and I think the reality is the data is very siloed, right? You have the activity data somewhere, you have the conversation data somewhere, you have the CRM data, you might have some web data, you have some contact data somewhere else. And so like we've been like actually a big initiative for us is being like, how do you bring this all together into one data engine so that you can query it and you can, structure the unstructured data, make it available. And then, there should always be these like decisions, right? Like, do you want to fully automate or not, right? Or do you, right? And I think this is really like a decision, right? Like AI coaching, right? Should the AI coach because the managers can't do it for every meeting? Or do you want to have like an additional coaching workflow? And so I think it's really like the way we approach it is like, it depends, right? There's different preferences. But what is most important is that you bring all the data together and you make it actionable. And I think the other piece you said really resonates well because like, I mean, whether it's like 40%, 50% or 60% of reps and CSMs spending on non-selling activities, there's a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff they need to do, whether that's internal meetings, whether that's, CRM updates, follow-up emails, prep, research, right? And so in my mind, right, like I think the future is very much the 10x seller, that, gets automated a lot of things and it's just more efficient, but also more effective, right? Like I think the reality is like we always talk about efficiency, but there's a lot we can do to be more effective. If you think about the typical way deal management is done, you sit in front of a list, you have no clue what you should be doing, right? That is the reality for most sellers today. And so how do you create, like, how do you have the agents tell you, hey, look, this is because I have all the context data, I have all the scores, I know what's going on, right? Like I can now make recommendations and you can basically then start executing. You still need somebody who is in the meeting and who hosts that conversation and who brings it all together, right? Like I don't think that's going to go away, at least not for like mid-market and enterprise, right? Like I think on the SME, highly transactional, right? Like product led is already doing it, but like mid-market enterprise, you need those folks for I think a long time, and then they'll have a variety of different agents that help them execute better and faster.
You're speaking exactly my language of where my head's going, where it is like a 10x seller. And I said teammates before, right? Those are agentic things that will basically like, I want January to reps walk in and say, you have new teammates that are going to make you a 10x seller now. You're going to have your portfolio, your territory, but here are all of these teammates. Here's a prospecting agent. Here's a territory planner agent. Here's a deal inspection. Here's a value, whatever we decide is going to be. Here's a meeting prep planner, whatever it may be, and 10x their output. That's where my head's going in terms of how we want to design it. And that's for the CSM and everything like that. But that's kind of, my ambitious goal for Jan 1 kind of thing.
Okay, so this is the sneak peek to our next episode. Yeah. I'm already very excited about it because we are basically on the same path building it. So it's essentially coming together and jamming on this topic. Before you go, I mean, is there any book outside of revenue architecture? I know you've read it. I mean, we had Jaco on the show speaking about it. It's a fantastic book. Everybody should read it. But like any other book you would recommend, or any other research report, or any other paper?
Gosh. I'm totally blanking being on the spot about it. And
FD,
I literally just gave someone like a list of like 10 books. Like you need to read all of these 10 books. Gosh, I mean, there's a lot of staples out there that I've always liked. I like the Ultimate Sales Leader, the John McMahon book. I like all the Challenger stuff, Matt Dixon, and the Jolt stuff.
Yeah.
Go to Market Advisors has a book, I'm forgetting the name, that I think is a good structural framework. I like Roberge. I know it's a little older, but I like the Mark Roberge book as well. I'm sure
also
there's
great
others.
podcast.
Yeah.
Running like very, very good.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, to be honest, we put you on the spot here. We should have said that in the beginning. We typically say that, but
sure,
it doesn't
I'll
matter.
pull up a list right after and be like, "Oh my gosh, in this book," But
No, it doesn't matter. This was like a really fantastic episode. I mean, this was like exactly how we love it. Very deep, very, very much focused on what you've done and lived through with the hard learnings. So thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. And yeah, wish you a great day.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. thank you for listening to the RevOps Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, share it with a RevOps friend or drop us a 5-star rating right now. And if you have feedback, questions, or guest ideas, just send a message to Yannis or me on LinkedIn. Thank you and see you next time.